You're listening to The Pump Fake.
And welcome into the Pump Fake, everybody. Jarrett Bailey here with you as always. The Week 3 recap edition of the Pump Fake. And what was one of the wildest weeks in terms of crazy endings in recent memory when it comes to just a Sunday full of game after game that ends on the final play. And we saw a lot of those both in the early window and the late window. We'll touch on every game that took place on Sunday here today. So if you're watching live on YouTube, be sure to leave a comment if you want to be part of the conversation. If you're listening to this in the Believe in Steelers podcast feed, please be sure to leave a comment, leave a review, do all that fun stuff. And be sure to subscribe on YouTube if you're watching over on the channel at J Bailey NFL. If you're watching live on Twitter as well, you can leave a comment to be part of the show. So like I said, we'll touch on every game, obviously focus on the bigger ones. And if you want to be part of the show, please do leave those comments. We'll start with the Chiefs and the Giants. Talking about the Chiefs this year has been weird. I know, and you know, they have not played well. They have not looked good. And even knowing that, and knowing that they haven't played well, and seeing that with my own eyes in these first 3 weeks, every time that somebody says, oh man, this thing's over, you know, the Chargers are going to win the division, this whole Chiefs thing is pretty much done, I immediately push back. And I do so because I've seen this before. You know, when I was growing up, I loved the movie Lethal Weapon. I thought it ruled. When I was in kindergarten, I saw it on VHS because my parents had it on VHS. Watching it for the first time, Lethal Weapon's a great movie. It starts off with Jingle Bell Rock playing. A naked young lady falls to her doom while under the influence of heroin. You got Mel Gibson, Danny Glover, Murtaugh being too old for this shit. Oh, it's a great movie. Lethal Weapon 2 is also awesome. But Lethal Weapon 3 came, and then Lethal Weapon 3 sucked. I understand that many people believe that this is the Chiefs' Lethal Weapon 3. I really do. But we heard those same claims in 2023 and 2024. Because in 2023, remember, they lose week 1 to the Lions. And throughout the entirety of that season, their receivers looked like babies chasing bubbles. Couldn't catch anything. And they still won the 3rd Super Bowl of the Mahomes era. And they beat all the teams and all the quarterbacks that you love. Last year, they win against Baltimore in week 1, in large part because they played a great game in the first half, but Baltimore came back in the second. And if Isaiah Likely's pinky toe isn't out of bounds, they potentially lose that game. And that set a precedent last year where they just won every week and increasingly batshit insane ways. And I'm supposed to sit here and think that because they lost their first 2 games against 2 good teams by a combined 9 points after Travis Kelce attempted homicide on Xavier Worthy and then handed the Eagles the ball in their own end zone in week 2, that they're all of a sudden, that the dynasty's done. I just can't buy that. I would love to be wrong. I would love if this thing was done. I want more parity. I'm tired of the Chiefs playing deep into January every year. I love for something new. You know, a few years ago when the Bengals and Rams played in the Super Bowl, how refreshing was that to not have the Chiefs, 49ers, and or Eagles play each other in the final game of the year? We've seen too much of that. And I would love something new. I really would. But I'm not going to sit here and be convinced that the Chiefs aren't going to get back to the Super Bowl based off what I've seen in the first 3 weeks. Because they're going to get Worthy back. They're going to get Rashee Rice back. Hell, They might get Tyreek Hill back if, Mike McDaniel keeps talking about, you win games by winning games. You don't lose games by not winning games or losing games. And then said something about being excited for the day he dies. I'm paraphrasing, but I'm pretty sure that's the gist. So I would love to be wrong, but the Chiefs are going to be fine. They're going to get all of their main contributors offensively back. Worthy will be back. Rice will be back. If they make some sort of trade, which we saw them do last year when they traded for DeAndre Hopkins, that's not something that is out of the question. And again, it could be Tyreek Hill. Dolphins are 0-3. Their season's all but done, especially if they lose to the Jets next week. If they're 0-4, just trade everybody and start over. But the point being that we're 3 weeks in. At this point last year, the New Orleans Saints were the darlings of the NFL. Started off 2-0, scored 40 points in each of their first 2 games. And then the real New Orleans Saints stood up, and that was the end of that. I understand that every game matters in the NFL, absolutely, especially when it comes to divisional games like they had in week 1 against the Chargers. But I'm not buying that the Chiefs are all of a sudden dead in the AFC, and for that matter, the AFC West. Like, everybody came into the year, I love the Chargers. That's great, but week 1 in Brazil was the biggest win of Justin Herbert's career. Never won a playoff game. I'll believe it when I see it. Oh, but the Broncos defense, that's cool. Bo Nix isn't good. Their offense stinks. I don't care. I can't be bothered to care about the Broncos. And before anybody tries to tell me how great the Raiders are and how good Geno Smith is, and they try to show me an all-22 clip of him throwing a deep ball, they just got beat by Marcus Mariota. I don't care. Stop trying to talk to me about the Raiders like they're a real team. The Chiefs are probably going to find a way to win 11, 12 games, still win the AFC West. They won't be the 1 seed. But as, my good buddy Matt Verderam pointed out, I needed a space recently. They don't care. As long as they get in, nobody's going to want to see them. And every team that they face will be a hell of a lot more terrified to play them than they are to play that team. Think Baltimore, if they're like the 2 seed and the Chiefs don't win the AFC West, you think they want to play the Chiefs? Hell no. And as much as I love Josh Allen and the Bills, they don't want to see him either. They're the best matchup for the Chiefs, sure. They don't want to see him because every time they play him in a big game, they lose. So I would love for something new. I would love for this to be a year where we don't see the Chiefs play deep into January. But I've also seen this movie before. And I'm not all of a sudden going to, climb on the bandwagon of, oh, man, this thing's really over. Start singing Kumbaya with everybody, interlocking arms. Like we just killed the Wicked Witch of the West. Because we're 3 weeks into the year and a lot can happen. And until we see somebody else win the AFC West, and until we see somebody beat the Chiefs in the playoffs in the AFC, I'm not going to sit here and say, yep, this thing's over. All right, let's move on to one of the crazier games of the 1 o'clock window. And I say one of because there was 3 games in the 1 o'clock window that were batshit insane. And we'll touch on all of those here. We'll start with the Eagles and the Rams. The Rams had this game in hand. They were winning 19-7 at the half. They come out of halftime. The Eagles start with the ball. Jared Verse has a strip sack on Jalen Hurts. The Rams score right away. It's 26-7. And the game looked over. I picked the Rams to win this game. This is a team in Los Angeles that has a really good defense, an offense that improved over the offseason, adding Devontae Adams, who had a touchdown grab in this game. Well, you look at what the Rams have on both sides of the ball. They have a top 10 quarterback in Matthew Stafford, a good running back in Kyron Williams, Puka, and Devontae out wide. And Jared Verse, Kobe Turner, like a really good defensive front seven. When you're up 19, you don't expect any team to come back. No matter how good the Eagles are, they weren't playing well. And then somehow something switched on for Philadelphia, because you look at the rest of the game, they had 3 touchdowns on their next 4 drives, and they had 2 drives of 13 plays or longer. And the Rams still moved the ball efficiently on offense. But opportune special teams came in handy for the Eagles. They blocked not 1, but 2 field goals, including what could have been the game winner for the Rams. And Jordan Davis gets a paw on it, scoops it up, and runs it back for a touchdown. And that's how the game ends, with the Eagles scoring 26 unanswered points. Insane way to end the game. And you look at how they won it. We've heard over the last 2 weeks that, oh man, Jalen Hurts and the Eagles, like, their passing game's not existent. They're not using A.J. Brown. They're not using Devontae Smith. Why do they even have them? This is a boring brand of football, and it is. And I try to be as objective as possible. I think that Jalen Hurts is a good quarterback. I'm not one of these people who says that, he's a, bottom-dwelling quarterback who rode the coattails of, a great running back, great receivers, good defense. Do I think he's a top 10 quarterback? No. But is he in the top 15? Sure. And he had a hell of a second half performance. He finished the game 21-32, 3 touchdown passes. A.J. Brown comes alive in this game, 6 catches, 109, and a touchdown. Devonta Smith, 8 catches, 60 yards, and a touchdown. And I think the Eagles needed a game like this to, A, face some sort of adversity, and B, get this passing game going. Because at some point they were going to have to. They weren't just going to be able to win games tush pushing their way downfield and giving the ball to Saquon Barkley 30 times a game. And while we're on it, I'll say it, ban the tush push. There's, last 2 weeks, there's been glaring examples of guys jumping early. It's hard to officiate. There's no reason. It's not a football play. Ban the stupid fucking play. I hate it. So if you want my opinion on that, there it is. But the Eagles needed a game like this, where they face some adversity, having to overcome a big deficit in the second half and lean on the quarterback in the passing game to be able to do it. And they did it against a really good team. Now they're 3-0. They look as strong as ever. And it certainly looks like they'll be the first team to win the NFC East consecutively since they did it. Was it 2004 and 2005, the last time that there was a repeat winner in the NFC East? So it looks like they're well on their way to do that. On the Rams side of things, this is something that they have to figure out against this team specifically. As my good buddy at The Athletic, Nate Atkins, wrote a really good piece detailing the issues that Sean McVay and the Rams seem to have with the Eagles. McVay's 1-6 against Philly for his career. Like, that's a trend. That's something that they got to figure out. And if you're the Rams today, you're sick, because you had this game won, you had it in hand, you could have gone to 3-0. But not only that, you would have had a leg up on the Eagles when it came to standings. But now Philadelphia owns the tiebreaker. And that could very well decide who gets the 1 seed with how both of these teams are playing. So a second half collapse like that, that's something that the Rams, I don't expect to happen again, because they're well coached. They have a great roster. Certain things just fell certain ways. And there was a little bit of luck in the favor of the Eagles involved. But at the same time, man, you can't allow a 13-play drive. You can't allow, a 17-play drive. Can't do it. So there's things that they need to address in the coming future to get right and get better, to make sure that if and when they do see the Eagles again in the postseason, that something like this doesn't happen. But again, if you're the Rams, you're sick, because this game and that ending could be what keeps you from playing a home game in January against Philadelphia and makes you travel back out east to play at the Link. It's not what you want. And that's one that, in the grand scheme of things, when we're in January and looking at the standings, we could come back to week 3 and circle this game as a potential, like, oh man, what happened? So we'll continue with the week 3 recap after this word from Wine Express. This episode is brought to you by wineexpress.com. And if you're a wine guy like me, it is the absolute paradise for all wine drinkers. From personalized recommendation from wine concierges who help you find wines that you love and even help curate selections if you'd like. They also have access to hard to find wines and will give you early access to coveted deals. And they'll help you find wine tastings, both local and virtual. It is the ultimate wine drinkers paradise. And right now they'll give you early access to their Labor Day sale, which offers up to 80% off certain wines. Click the link in the description below for access to the Labor Day sale with up to 80% off certain wines at wineexpress.com. All right, welcome back into the Pump Fake, everybody. We are powered by FanDuel Sportsbook, America's #1 sportsbook. And if you want to look at the odds for tonight's game against or featuring the Detroit Lions against the Baltimore Ravens, a matchup between two of the powers in the NFL right now. The Ravens are favored by 4.5 at home. We've seen the two polar ends of the Lions so far this season, where they looked their absolute worst against Green Bay and their absolute best against Chicago. If they can look anything close to that absolute best against Baltimore, I'll pick them to win. But for now, I will pick them to cover that 4.5 point line against the Ravens, a team where a game is never truly in hand, as we've come to learn over the years. Let's get to sticking in the NFC North. Let's get to the Packers and the Browns. The Browns defeat Green Bay 13-10 after overcoming a 10-0 fourth quarter deficit. We talked about the Rams choking a game away. Green Bay did the exact same thing. There's no reason that the Browns should have won this game. Jordan Love throws a late interception that leads to points for the Browns. And then, speaking of blocked kicks, Shelby Harris blocks a kick for the Browns and then sets up a game-winning kick from Andre Smith for Cleveland in a game that both defenses played incredibly well. I'm going to give flowers first to the Browns because their defense right now looks like the best in football. I understand that they gave up 41 to the Ravens, but for a while in that game, it was a 10-3 game until eventually the offense just put them on the field too much. Fatigue set in, and the Ravens just began blowing the doors off. But this is a great defense. We saw what they did to a fully healthy Bengals team in week 1. We just saw what they did to a Packers team that looked like gods in the first 2 weeks, and they held them to 10 points. This is an incredibly well-coached unit with Jim Schwartz. They deserve a lot of credit, and that's a gutsy win for a Browns team that, each of the past couple years where they haven't been very good have found ways to keep things competitive because of that defense, and they deserve a lot of credit for that, so good for them. On the other side, with Green Bay, it wasn't a good game from the offense, and it wasn't a good game from Jordan Love. Let me say this, though, to Packers fans who are freaking out right now. And I don't think it's most of them. I'm seeing things on Packers Twitter that just make me roll my eyes, though, where we're saying, oh, my goodness, Jordan Love. Oh, why is he their quarterback? Why is he my quarterback? Packers fans say. Are you out of your mind? Jordan Love right now is 7th in the league in EPA per dropback, while averaging the 6th most air yards per attempt in the league. And he's 4th in the league in deep pass percentage. What that means is that he's consistently chucking the ball downfield and is still one of the most efficient quarterbacks in the NFL. Not every quarterback, actually precisely 0 quarterbacks, are going to look great every week. The best quarterbacks are going to have off days. Josh Allen will have an off day. Lamar Jackson will have an off day. Burrow, Mahomes, Stafford, all of them. There will be games where they just look off. That doesn't mean that they're bad quarterbacks. There are plenty of general managers and head coaches that would saw off their left arm to have Jordan Love, me included. This is one of the top 10 quarterbacks in the NFL. I don't think that's much of a question right now. Seeing what he did in week 1 against Detroit, seeing what he did in week 2 against Washington. Go look at his passing chart at Next Gen Stats. I think he averaged 13.7 average depth of target. Consistently, just launching the ball downfield. One of the best tight window throwers in the league. One of the best deep ball throwers in the league. Did he have a bad game against Cleveland? Yes. Were there plays watching that game back where I had to squeeze my fist really hard because you can see that he made a decision that he shouldn't have? Of course. The play where it's 3rd and 1 and Carson Schweschinger is rushing him. He's running to his right. He could have just thrown the ball away and he eats a sack. You can't do that. It's a dumb play. But everybody in the league would take a guy like Jordan Love, who, he's going to do some dumb shit sometimes. He's going to have a bad interception. He's going to have a bad game. Shit like that's going to happen. But he can also make throws that only a select handful of quarterbacks can make. He's going to give you a chance in every game because of that special arm talent. And that's something that everybody in the NFL is searching for, is that kind of guy. And that's why it's so coveted, because it's a complete game changer when you do have that guy. Jordan Love is one of those guys. I understand if you're a Packers fan, you're annoyed. Losses suck, especially losses like that to teams that you should beat. But every quarterback's going to have a bad game. Every quarterback's going to have a bad performance. Especially guys like Jordan Love, who are, a throwback gunslinger type quarterback. You live by him, you die by him. But in the biggest games, you'll take a guy like that over Jared Goff. You'll take a guy like that over Brock Purdy. You'll take a guy like that over Tua. Take a guy like that over Bo Nix. You take the guy that's going to give you the higher ceiling and plays well and can do some shit that other guys just can't. Did he have a bad game? Yes, of course. But to sit here and say that Jordan Love is a bad quarterback is asinine. Absolutely dumb. And Packers fans should hold him close because there aren't many guys like him in the NFL. So I understand losses are frustrating, especially against teams that you should beat. But it happens to just about every team every year. In 2022, the Chiefs lost to the Matt Ryan-led Colts. 2021, the Bengals, they lost to the Jets, who were on their 4th quarterback. Okay? Shit happens sometimes. It's the NFL. That's why they play the games. And sometimes things just go incredibly right for one team. Things just go incredibly bad for another. But to sit here and say, oh, man, why is Jordan Love my quarterback? Hey, there's a lot of teams in the NFL that would happily take him off your hands. So treasure Jordan Love because he's special. My goodness. It angers me when we get so reactionary about stuff when you don't need to. And again, like I said, losses are a pain in the ass. I get it. But Jordan Love is one of the most special quarterback talents in the NFL. And guess what? The Packers are still going to be perfectly fine because they have him. And because they have a great defense, because they have Josh Jacobs, because they have a good receiving core. The team's going to be fine. So we'll touch on the rest of the NFL schedule as I get it pulled up here. And again, those will be quick hitters on the rest of the slate around the NFL. We'll start the Panthers and the Falcons. I'm done listening to anybody talking about the Atlanta Falcons. That ship has sailed. You lose a close one to Tampa Bay week 1. All right, stuff happens if Wang Huku makes the kick. It's a different game. I get it. Defensively, you play well against Minnesota week 2. Offensively, you still don't look great, though. I think they one touchdown was scored in that game. It was a Tyler Algier run. All right, whatever. You're 1-1, young quarterback. You get shut out 30-0 by a Panthers team that's going to be drafting in the top 5. I'm good. And I'm glad that I changed my preseason prediction in the NFC South and just went back to Tampa. Because for a little bit, I believed in the Falcons hype. But more and more, man, Raheem Morris doesn't look like the guy to me. Michael Penix has a lot to prove. They haven't been able to get any sort of connection going with Drake London. It's been Bijan or bust offensively. That's a team that has a lot to figure out on both sides of the ball. Jacksonville, Houston. This is a game where, narratively speaking, there's a lot that comes from this game. There's a lot riding on it because it has two quarterbacks in Trevor Lawrence and CJ Stroud, who are two very big narrative guys for this season. CJ Stroud didn't have a good year last year. Neither did Trevor Lawrence. He was hurt a lot of it. Jacksonville had a really bad year and cleaned house. For the Texans, still won the AFC South last year, but failed to take that next step forward after trading for Stephon Diggs. And this year, they were supposed to fix the offensive line, which was really bad last year. Instead, it's gotten worse, but so is CJ Stroud. He's got 15 interceptions in his last 20 starts. He has struggled immensely. He threw another bad late interception that sealed the deal for Jacksonville. And overall, just has not looked good in these first three games. And the Texans offense has really struggled because of it. And now sitting at 0-3 while the Colts are 3-0. I mean, that's a hole that it's going to be very hard to dig out of. If they had a better offensive line, then maybe we could have that conversation. If they had better weapons, maybe we could have that conversation. But the offensive line's terrible. The weapons outside of Nico Collins aren't good. Defensively, they're very good. D'Amico Ryans, I think, is a good head coach. But when you got CJ Stroud talking about being happy that the sun's going to rise tomorrow, hey, bud, that's not a good place to be in. So the Texans are in real trouble, and some real questions are being asked about CJ Stroud. And I think they're fair to ask. Do I still think he's good? I do. But seeing what we've seen in these first 3 weeks, man, none of that has been helping the narrative around him. On the other side, Liam Cohen and Trevor Lawrence, they get the job done. Brian Thomas has a big late catch, and they're sitting at 2-1 and within a game of the Colts in the AFC South. Bengals and Vikings, we don't need to talk too much about this. I do want to point out Isaiah Rodgers got the highest grade in the history of PFF. I think he got a 99.9. He had a fumble return for a touchdown. He had a pick six. The Vikings defense just owned Jake Browning all game. They went 48-10. Carson Wentz throws 2 touchdowns. Jordan Mason runs for over 100 yards and 2 touchdowns. Just pure domination from Minnesota. They go to Ireland next week to face the Steelers to try to get to 3-1. Both teams in that game will be 2-1 teams. Speaking of the Steelers, they win an ugly game. 5 takeaways for Pittsburgh, and they still found a way to have this game come down to the final drive. Drake May throws a pass to Pop Douglas on 4th and 1. He runs backwards to try to dodge a tackle. Can't get the yard back. Brandon Echols tackles him. Game over. Aaron Rodgers threw 2 touchdowns. The Steelers didn't look good in this game. If you followed me for a while, or if you're listening on the Believe in Steelers podcast feed, you know where my allegiance lies. The Steelers defense, while they had 5 takeaways, they looked awful on 3rd down again. They're the worst team in the NFL when it comes to 3rd and 4th down success rate defensively. The middle of the field is constantly wide open. Drake May had a pretty good game throwing the football. And offensively, they scored 2 touchdowns on their first 2 drives, and then they were incredibly dormant until their final drive, where Aaron Rodgers threw a touchdown pass to Calvin Austin to put them ahead 21-14. But they had a series of drives in which they had 4 straight 3-and-outs. That pretty much sums up this game. It was ugly between 2 teams who I picked to make the playoffs, but that have pretty low ceilings from the looks of it. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the New York Jets, another game in the 1 o'clock window that featured a blocked kick and a game-winning field goal. Coming down to the final play, the Buccaneers seemed to have this thing in hand. The Jets battled back in the second half. Emeka Egbuka made multiple huge catches again. And, I'm one who can openly admit when they're wrong about stuff. I got no problem doing that. Emeka Egbuka, when the Buccaneers drafted him, I said, all right, why are you drafting a wide receiver? You got Mike Evans, you got Chris Godwin. Why are you drafting another receiver? Hey, sorry about that. Emeka Egbuka freaking rules. And he has been instrumental in the Bucs 3-0 start. So a very fun game that featured the Jets blocking a field goal, returning it to the house. And then the Buccaneers coming back down the field and kicking a game-winning field goal. They're 3-0. I think the NFC South is all but wrapped up now, as the Falcons and Panthers are both 1-2. The Saints are 0-3. This division's all but done. The Colts and the Titans. Good for Daniel Jones, man. Sincerely. I don't think many people saw that coming in terms of how well he's played. He hasn't turned the ball over. He's making smart decisions when throws aren't there and using his athleticism to take off and run. Jonathan Taylor had a great game with 3 touchdowns. The Titans look like a team already dead in the water. This is a team that's not playing for their head coach. Wouldn't be shocked if Brian Callahan is the first head coach fired. I still believe in Cam Ward. He's, makes a couple plays per game that make you go, there's something there. And I do think there's something there. But when you look at the lack of weapons that he has offensively, bad offensive line, a defense that isn't very good, this is a team that might win 3 games and could be picking number 1 overall again. So good job to Daniel Jones and the Colts. They win 41-20. And as I said, Brian Callahan could be the first guy out of a job when it comes to head coaches sooner rather than later. The Las Vegas Raiders and the Washington Commanders, touched on this a little bit already. Washington, great performance from Marcus Mariota coming in, playing well. They had a good showing from their run game. Defensively, they showed up. Dan Quinn took a big hit on the sideline. He had like a busted up nose and kept coaching through it. So Washington wins 41-24. There's a big Jeremy McNichols touchdown run in this game. Vegas just couldn't slow down what the Commanders were doing in the run game. And Washington took advantage of that and was able to pull off a blowout win. As I said earlier, I'm done talking about the Raiders in terms of being a serious team. Don't come at me with that. They've played horrible in 2.5 of the 3 games so far. So I think that I'm kind of over listening to them and listening to people talk about them. The Chargers and the Broncos. Justin Herbert is playing the best football of his career right now. There is a rep in this game in the 4th quarter. He escapes pressure, and while about to get hit, throws a touchdown pass into the tightest of windows to Keenan Allen. That ends up being the difference. They get the ball back. Cameron Dicker kicks a game-winning field goal. The Chargers are 3-0. The Broncos are 1-2. Bo Nix missed multiple deep shots in this game, most notably 2 to Marvin Mims that could have gone for scores. And hey, never wrong, just early. I said Bo Nix, I just don't see him as a long-term franchise guy. I don't see him as a star. I don't see Denver as this world-beating team. And so far, they're 1-2 and 0-2 against a Colts team that's 3-0 and a Chargers team that's 3-0. The Seahawks beat the Saints 44-13. This is where we start to see the Saints finally fall apart. They kept it competitive in the first 2 games. Both games were decided by 1 score. They had a chance to win both of those games. Here, 44-13. Seahawks have a really good defense. Don't forget, Clint Kubiak, who was the Saints offensive coordinator last year, is now the Seahawks offensive coordinator. So I'm sure that he had a little bit of a hand in terms of telling Mike McDonald, hey, here's what you can expect from Spencer Rattler and the skill position guys that they have on offense. Sam Darnold played a pretty well game. I don't think that this tells me much about the Seahawks. I still think they're a team with a very high floor. High ceiling. They have a high floor, a higher floor than I expected. But in terms of what I think about the Seahawks, I don't think this game taught us too much. They beat the hell out of a team that they, should have beaten the hell out of. Good for them. But in terms of, do I think that this is a team that's going to win the NFC West? No. Do I think this is a team that's going to make a deep playoff run? No. But they win a convincing game here, and they can feel pretty good about that. Chicago and Dallas. Caleb Williams throws 4 touchdown passes, including one on a flea flicker to Luther Burden. DJ Moore gets his first touchdown of the year. Defensively, Dallas is shot, man. They've given up multiple 50-yard passes. Last week, they gave up 2 50-plus yard passes. This week, they gave up the flea flicker to Luther Burden. They gave up one in week 1 against Philly. Just not a good defense right now. And for Caleb Williams, good for him. 4 touchdown performance. Didn't get sacked for the first time in his career. And the Chicago offense, this is what Bears fans expected when Ben Johnson became the head coach. little bit of trickery, but also efficiency. Grounded play for Caleb Williams where it's not sporadic. It is controlled chaos. And this is what the Bears offense can look like when it's at its peak. And if they can sustain this, they started off 0-2, but now sitting at 1-2 in an NFC that's still, in terms of wild card teams, pretty up in the air. We'll see what the next few weeks look like for Chicago, but the offense and the defense for that matter, who had multiple takeaways, multiple interceptions off Dak Prescott, they can feel good about their performance, especially in doing so without Jalen Johnson. The Cardinals and the 49ers, much like I'm done talking about the Raiders, I'm done talking about the Cardinals. I don't care. They had a safety late in this game, and they got the ball back, obviously, late in the fourth quarter after the safety. There's a holding call in the end zone when Mac Jones still had the ball. And the Cardinals get the ball back. They do piss all with it. And then the 49ers get the ball back, kick a game-winning field goal, 16-15. This is what the Cardinals are. Their offense isn't scary. Kyler Murray is just Kyler Murray at this point, man. This is what he is. A guy who's drafted number 1 overall who they had higher expectations for, and he just didn't meet them. 15 points, and they can't take advantage of a late safety to put the 49ers away. Instead, San Francisco and Mac Jones are now 3-0 and sit atop the NFC West, while the Cardinals, they started off 2-0. This feels very Saintsy to me from last year, where, they started off 2-0, and I don't care. Their 2 wins were games that they eked out against the Saints and the Panthers. Hardy har. This just isn't a good team. Defensively, they're pretty solid. Offensively, there's nothing there. Kyler Murray just isn't the guy. Marvin Harrison doesn't look like he's the guy either. Trey McBride's really the only skill position guy there where you look at and say, yeah, that's a star. But Kyler Murray shows consistently that he's not the franchise answer for a team that's going to go to the playoffs consistently. And Marvin Harrison Jr. doesn't look good right now. And that is every game on the Week 3 Sunday slate. Recapped, talked about. Tonight, Monday Night Football, Lions at Ravens. We'll be back to recap that tomorrow, right here on the Pump Fake. And again, if you're watching this on YouTube, please be sure to subscribe to the channel. If you are listening on the Believe in Steelers podcast feed, leave a review, leave a comment. Be sure to follow along with the show to keep the podcast rising up those podcast charts. So appreciate everybody for tuning in. Look forward to talking to you later on in the week. This is the Pump Fake.